All right. Welcome. Welcome to Atlanta.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Very, very moving.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
So, not many of us get to go through an adventure like this, much less see ourselves played on screen by Harry Potter. So, what is that experience like for you both, reliving through the film and then seeing it received the way it is by audiences like this?
Well, it's very moving, and it's a privilege and an honor, and it's a dream come true. The movie by itself is a story of a great adventure, the making of the movie, the years it took to make a movie. The joy I have now as an Israeli to see how many times it screamed, Yossi, Yossi! When I first came to Hollywood, they said, no way Yossi can be an Israeli. Audience will not go to the movie to see an Israeli protagonist. So to see Daniel playing, doing my role, and he did a great job. So of course, it's very moving. I'm very happy with the movie. I think it tells the true story, and it portrays the characters the ways they were. It's not over-dramatized. So it's a great joy. It's a great journey, and I'm happy to tell you more in details. Please.
Excellent. Now, you had spent some time in the military before this. Did your military service help at all in the survival?
I think so, because I've been actually on a missile boat on the Red Sea from 77 to 80. Like any other Israeli, I did my 3 years of mandatory service. It's not exactly a combat fighter, like being on a missile boat, but I think the solitude is something that helped me. I already left home, I dealt with the world on my own, and I think in a sense that helped me when I traveled and when I got lost. I was a bit more seasoned, but not in a sense of survival. I had no knowledge of survival, I had no knowledge of the Amazon or that kind of terrain, big rivers. We have 2 rivers in Israel, very famous. One not so famous, Yarkon River. It doesn't exist anyway. And the Jordan River, here it would be called the Jordan Creek or something like that. In the Amazon, it will not be counted. So I didn't have much experience at all. But the beauty about survival, I think, is that you don't need experience. That in real time, when your life is in danger, the knowledge of your ancestors, all the way, millenniums and maybe millions of years go, because we are here, because we have great survival skills. So there was an awakening of my survival more than any teachings that I needed.
Throughout the film, it has a number of touchstones, including this idea of luck, but then also fate, and then also faith. And how do you view the story, and how do you sort of weave together the randomness, but also that sense of maybe being chosen, having the talisman, having the book that got you through?
That's true, initially maybe you see things as random or as luck, but in situations like that, in extreme situation, sometimes the miracles happen and there's no time to veil them. It's too urgent, so you actually see that it's a miracle. So that's my experience. Those were, there were so many miracles that kept me alive, and in a sense, I started seeing a miracle in everything. As Daniel is talking to the girl that appears, that God is here, and that's how I felt. Every time I found a fruit or an egg or a perfect tree to sleep under, I didn't consider it luck. I really felt like it was providence. And that sense was very, very present. Apart from that booklet of my uncle was a real thing. It's very hard to imagine how impossible it was for the river to spit the bag a day after the accident. How impossible it was. And for me, in that bag, the important thing was the booklet. I knew the booklet was there, so the moment I pulled the booklet from the bag and I held it, I knew I'm going to be all right. I'm not going to die. It gave me that assurance. So there was a great significance to faith, and I would say that apart from everything else that I went through, in a way, I found my faith as well through that adventure story.
That's wonderful. We're going to open it up for questions, so if you do have a question, please raise your hand. We have people with microphones coming around with orange hats, so we will point and they will answer.
Yes, how did you feel when you had to leave the little book in the swamp, in the quicksand?
Well, I must tell you, the movie is very, very accurate and it tells a true story, but there's a few artistic touches. So I'll tell you about the artistic touches where they are. There were no butterflies, not in the beginning of the movie and not in the end of the movie. And the booklet actually stayed with me. I didn't lose it in the swamp, but I did lose it 20 years later when my house in Sydney, I was robbed and people broke into the house and they took my wallet as well, and I lost that booklet 20 years later. In a way, it was terrible to lose it, but I think it served me, and I think I'm okay with the idea of being mortal. I think it's all right,
And now there's two immortal thieves running around Australia who will never...
Invincible,
yeah.
yeah.
It's like the Green Lantern, you pass the power on.
But I want to say about the booklet contained verses from the Book of Splendor, the Zohar, the Holy Zohar. My uncle, little did I know, he was a rabbi, but I didn't know that he was a Kabbalist as well, and he was studying the Zohar day and night. And he had this booklet in his pocket. Was some booklet that was given to the community in a synagogue in the beginning of last century, really early 20th century. And my uncle, that also went through the Holocaust, had this booklet with him all his life, and he gave it to me as I was drafted to the military. And in the movie you see that Daniel is saying, 2 days after he gave it to me, he died. Well, it's not true. It was 45 minutes after he gave it to me. And the director said, nobody's going to believe it. So they said 2 days to make it believable, but actually my uncle gave me the booklet. By the time I came back home, he was living in Rehovot, if anybody knows where it is, and I was living in Ramat Gan. It took me about an hour to get from... When I came home, my mother was on the floor crying and pulling her hair, and I was shocked. And she said, "You don't know, your uncle just died." So it took 45 minutes since he gave me that booklet, a totally healthy man, and he got a heart attack and he died. So it was of great, great significance to me, this booklet.
I believe we have one here, or back there we have another flashlight. Yes.
Yeah, when you saw the friend and were your vocal cords not strong enough to scream out his name?
I couldn't scream. This wasn't dramatized. This was the way things happened. I'll just explain. They were searching for 3 days. The airplane wasn't searching. It did its official duty to pacify the Israeli pressure to search. But they didn't search because there was no use in searching. Nobody believes there's any chance that I'm still alive after 17 days. The airplane passed, it was 17 days. Kevin was the only one that didn't give up. So he found Tico, and with Tico he went upriver to search for me. They were searching for 3 days. On the third day, it was already too dangerous for them. The river was very narrow, logs were shooting down, trees that were eroded were shooting down the current. And Tico wanted to turn the boat and go back, but he couldn't do the maneuver because the river was so gushing and narrow and dangerous that he couldn't do the maneuver. So he realized that he needs to find the shore in order to land and turn the boat manually. Since I heard the airplane, I also was looking for a shore, for an open beach, because I knew that under the canopy I would not be found. That's why I also showered myself with the fire ants, because I couldn't collapse under the canopy. I had to find an opening. So when I found the opening was the night before. I marked my initial on the shore, because I was expecting an airplane. This was my hope, that one airplane will come, another airplane will come to search for me. So I marked my initials, and then I dragged myself about 100 yards up, away from the shore, away from the river. The reason for that is that on the 15th day I was taken by a swamp. So by now I learned, and that's why I wanted to be safe if another wave is coming, another flood is coming. So I pulled myself away from the river. When the boat came, they didn't stop to search. It was very rare to find a beach, because in the rainy season the river is so high, all the beaches are just covered. So when they found that opening, they landed and immediately they turned the boat. I heard the noise only when they left, when the full throttle was squeezed. Then I heard the noise. I was sure it's a wasp or a bee. And I was trying to just chase that away. When I finally raised my head, they were already going down river. I tried to run, I couldn't run. My feet wouldn't carry me anymore, and I just couldn't scream. I just couldn't, the voice wouldn't come up. And I looked at them going down. Kevin was in a different position. Kevin was sobbing. He was holding his head with both hands and crying, because he knew it was over. And for some reason, something made him, just before they cut the curves, something made him lift his head and turn it, and he saw me there. You know, for us, at that present moment, everybody could feel that this is impossible. You know, like they were searching for 3 days. They stopped to turn where I collapsed the night before. You know, everybody could feel that, you know, there was much more. You couldn't explain it. It was just coincidence, you know. It was an amazing moment.
Beautiful. We have one over here.
Yes, as a mom who has had those moments with her son, what are you thinking of doing? Would you mind talking a little bit about your parents after the movie? I know you showed a lot of scenes then. Did you reconcile with your father, or what happened then?
Yeah. Well, my father was a character, and you know, in the end, he became also my hero and my mentor. He taught me the biggest secret of life, my father, because his last 3 years, from 84 to 87, where he was already with liver cancer, he suddenly had a brilliant idea how to treat. He decided to go alternative, and instead of going radiation and chemotherapy, he went organic, found some herb from Russia, that they make a drink out of it. It's called vodka. And he started applying vodka, and it helped. And so he taught me the secret of life, that's what I reckon, because my father died happy. And I think that's the secret of life, is to die happy, because I've seen it on my father. He had a very tough life, you know, went through the Holocaust and moved to a new country and started from scratch. And it wasn't simple. But when you die happy, it colors all your life happy. And if you die bitter, it colors all your life bitter. So he became my mentor and my hero, and we, of course, reconciled. But yes, the suffering of my parents is 100-fold more than what I suffered. My suffering is more exotic, because it's swamp and jaguars and snakes. But they were just at home, and they knew that I'm missing, because the moment Kevin approached the Israeli embassy, they had to do some, you know, checking, and they called my parents, and they found out my parents. And for the last 10 days of you know, my adventure, my parents were aware that I'm missing. Nobody wanted to give them hope, because there was no hope. All the experts, they said there's no chance he's coming out. So they prepared them basically to a very terrible announcement. So for them it was also a miracle. And of course today, as a father myself, I can relate to that and know how much pain I caused them. But I have children, and I will not tell my children that they're indulgent or that they shouldn't travel. You know, life is dangerous, we know that, and life is a great adventure. Otherwise, you know, why live it? You know, we're not here to play it safe in this life. We can't. You know, we know what happens. You know, we all die in the end. So what's the point?
Great. Question over here.
Besides the booklet, what was the most important thing in your backpack to survive?
Well, there were a few things in the backpack, but they didn't really help. Like the flashlight and the mosquito net. I managed to chase that jaguar on the 6th night of my adventure, and that saved my life probably. This is a very dense place where I was lost. When I say very dense is actually an understatement. The proper statement is the most densest place on the planet in terms of biodiversity. The Madidi jungle is the most populated place on the planet. It's the biggest jaguar population on the planet as well. And jaguars were around me every night. So that night when I actually heard something so close to me, it served me to have that mosquito net and the lighter. I couldn't use the lighter anymore. I didn't have fire. I had rice and beans in my backpack, but I couldn't eat them because everything was wet. I couldn't start a fire. I think the booklet was the main thing. Yeah, I had the red poncho, which I covered myself at night, and it kept me a bit warm and dry. So I was wet, in the jungle, in the rainy season it rains non-stop, because even if it doesn't rain, the canopy keeps dripping big, heavy drops of rain. So I was wet basically for 3 weeks. So there was a medicine kit that belonged to Kevin, so I didn't know exactly what all the pills were. I took a speed on my first day. This was a very big mistake because I ran all day and I just ruined my feet. On the 19th day, what you saw there falling into the swamps, actually there were 2 swamps, but they show 1 swamp, but I came out of 1 swamp and then I fell into another swamp, and for hours. And there was one moment in the swamps that I took out the medicine kit of Kevin's, all kind of there were like 50, 60 pills, and I just poured them all in my hand, and I was about to swallow them because I realized I'm gonna sink and drown in that swamp. And then, as I was about to do that, 2 things, were just flashing through my mind. One was indeed an image of my mother, and I couldn't do it. And the other one was a thought that if I would have killed myself, it would have been better on the 1st or 2nd day. But after 19 days, I'm not gonna do it, so.
Just out of spite. Yes, we have one over here.
So I think I have like a twofold question. What was your relationship with Kevin since the movie? And then in the paragraph at the end of the movie, we see that in essence you guys changed places. You went back to the Amazon and he went to Israel. Yeah. So can you speak to that as well?
Sure. Well, I'll start in the opposite order because Kevin came to Israel a year after this adventure. I'll just explain how it happened. We came back together from the Amazon to La Paz, Bolivia. And in La Paz, we were both backpackers. The only difference, he was an American backpacker, I was an Israeli backpacker. The American, like any other backpacker, are going to cheap hostels to sleep. But the Israelis don't go to cheap hostels. They go to sleep for free. So we slept at the Jewish senior citizen house in La Paz as Israelis, and we didn't have to pay anything. But Kevin saved my life, so I told him, what, I think they'll let you pass. And I took Kevin with me. He was a Catholic boy from the Dalles, about 30 miles above Portland, Oregon. And he came from a real Catholic family with like 7, 8 kids. And in the senior citizen house, the Jewish senior citizen house, he met a girl named Orna, and they fell in love. So a year later, Kevin came to visit her in Israel. He converted, he became a Jew, and he moved, he became a kibbutznik. For the last 30 years, he lives in a kibbutz called Neve Ilan. It's about 15 minutes down from Jerusalem. And he's got 2 boys that finished, both of them finished the army and the university. And he's a beautiful family man and a kibbutznik, incredibly. So that's his story. Now, the relationship between me and Kevin are, on one hand, we're like family. On the other hand, it's not smooth, especially around every time this movie, this story gets exposure. The first exposure was the books that I wrote about it. The book was translated into more than 20 languages or sold millions of copies worldwide. Then there was a Discovery Channel documentary 10 years ago. It was the opening chapter of a series, very successful series called I Shouldn't Be Alive. I don't know if you remember that, but this was the opening chapter, a 45 minutes documentary called Escape from the Amazon, portraying a docudrama portraying our story. And now we have this fantastic movie. Every time this movie the story gets exposure, the relationship between me and Kevin is very, very tense. And it's tense because the story haunts us. It still haunts us. And what happened that morning when we split from Marcus is the heart of it all. That's the essence of it all. And you know, people go through life and then something happens, and what happens is very hard to hold. You know, like the truth is very elusive. To describe what happened, you tell a story, but it's already your narration, it's your narrative, it's your story. Kevin and me, we tell 2 different stories about what happened that morning. And we don't tell the same story. I feel we betrayed Marcus. He was injured, he was down, was, you know, emotionally. We were 3 friends, and yet we didn't allow him to make a choice. We decided for him that he's not going to join us. Marcus felt betrayed, he cried, and what you see in the movie is that I've manipulated him. I indeed manipulated him, but I manipulated him trying to somehow save him the misery of knowing that we don't want him. That's why I manipulated him. Kevin had a different view, and he feels that the choice was done because Marcus wouldn't have made it on the raft, and not because we deserted him. So I tell Kevin, look, you saved my life. I love you. Forever will be in debt to you, but I cannot forget my memories, and I cannot you know, not feel what I feel. So, you know, this is the issues that still haunts Kevin and me. This disagreement of what happened with Marcus, because my feeling upsets him, because if I feel we betrayed him, but it's my point of view, you know, even though it's our story, it's my narrative. It's my naive young eyes, I was 22 at the time, looking at these characters and telling the story. This is my story, not his story. Kevin, by the way, wrote a book. He wrote the book just recently. The book is about to be published. I read the book, and I tell you sincerely, it's much better than my book. Much, much better. He's a much greater writer. Actually, the reason why my book sold millions of copies in 20 languages is because I'm not a writer. And there was no writer to spoil the good story. I just told what happened without any expositions, without any elaborate nature description, without perspective, without analysis, without philosophy. I just told the story as it happened, candid, really completely honest. And that's the power of my book. But Kevin is a real author. He brought the entire thing to life. And when his book is published soon, I really recommend you read it.
We have time for one more question, and I believe it's in the back right there. Yes.
It's really impressive how vivid you recall it. How quickly did you start writing once you were rescued?
Well, the story just wanted to be told. I really feel that, this is a big story, and in a way I'm a carrier of this story, and it's a privilege. The story wanted to be told. That evening, when I was rescued, they immediately took me down river. When Tico found a safe place, they made a camp, they lit a fire. This was the first time I told the story. Then I got to the town of Ur and Abake, and hordes of people came, and everybody wanted to know what happened to me. So for 3 days in Ur and Abake, I had to tell the story again and again. Then I was taken to La Paz, and in short, that story wanted to be told all the time. When I arrived in Israel, it was 6 months later, by the way, because I didn't go back home, because it was time of Carnival in Brazil, and I wasn't that sucker to go home and miss the Carnival. So I stayed for a couple of months by then, and it was lucky actually, because the worst disease was incubating, and it just erupted 2 months later. Luckily, I was still in Brazil. I was hospitalized in Brazil for 3 months to treat this deadly disease. So only 6 months later, I arrived home. When I arrived home to Israel, I got offers from 2 publishers. So I was approached already. The story arrived before me, and I started writing it. And writing it was such an experience. I think it's when I actually, this was my therapy also, because I never had any session of therapy. I never had any nightmare. And I think that maybe writing that, telling the story first and then writing it, in a way made it not my story anymore. I gave it to the world. And when I took it to the publishers 6 months later, I insisted that no editing. Just, there was a grammar but no editing in terms of the writing. It's very, very raw. So as I said before, there's no writer. But everything came up for me. When I wrote the book, everything, to the smallest, tiniest detail, everything came up. It was a fantastic experience. And I'm really proud of the book, because the book gave so much healing to so many people, from Israeli soldiers in their beds after injuries, and to people all over the world that have read the book and found in it some power to deal with their day-to-day life. So I'm privileged to be the carrier of this story. I cannot take credit for the story. It's something that happened, not something that I have invented.
It's an inspiration. Thank you for sharing it with us. Tell all your friends. And it's an honor. Thank you so much for coming.